morning. I would like to thank Mr. Balakakis for inviting me. He asked me to do something difficult. He gave me 10 minutes to talk about lessons learned from the Common Agricultural Policy that is around 40 years in Greece, and then make a projection of the future regarding the strategic plan. It wouldn't seem rational to do that within 10 minutes because, first of all, we have to choose a sector, economic, social, environmental. So I will try to briefly talk about to address you, and I'm really happy to talk right after the EU representatives. And we're practically talking about the CAP from 2023 to 2027. Let's start by what is a strategic plan. It is the integrated programming document that each member state must submit, and in this document, each member state must demonstrate how the CAP tools are going to be implemented. Such tools are Pillar 1, regarding direct payments, that is a check to the producer, as mentioned in the Greek lingo, the Greek slang. And it's about also sectoral programs whose implementation requests collective bodies, which is not eminent in Greece comparing to the EU. And why we say that this is so important? Because if we try to address this issue in brief, the CAP, in the framework of the second pillar, has started being implemented in Greece from 1989. As a country, we are very aware of what happened in the second pillar because these interventions, evaluation was obligatory. So we have a clear picture, and I will try to be very brief. We can see some timelines. 1989 and to 1999 are the first two community support frameworks, the first two rural development programs that are implemented by a national sectoral program. Almost 35 to 40% of the rural funds resources are utilized. We have the first pilot implementation of the LEADER initiative. What is the basic feature? Rural development programs are a set of regulations, a different regulation for improvement plans, another regulation for manufacturing processing. So this implementation model gained its first innovation in around 2000, where we had the first modification of this regulation. And there is, in 2003, the direct payments to the production, to the producers. Up to 2014, we have significant changes, increase and decrease in the number of programs. From 2007, we have a national program that helps us monitor what is achieved. As we say, lessons learned that are important in order to be able to program for the next period, the next programming period. Basic lessons learned. We have great participation of farm-based payments in the total budget, and especially the compensatory remuneration. There is a small relative weight in investment measures, and we also faced increased difficulty in implementing such programs. Each government remains stagnant regarding this implementation and finding how these funds are acquired and allocated. There is a high percentage of almost 20 to 25% transferred funds from one programming period to another. We have difficulties in the completion of reclamation works. Sometimes 2 programming periods are required to complete reclamation works. We face difficulties in implementing soft actions, and as Mr. Haniotis said, these soft actions are important for agricultural policy. For example, education, consulting, promotion, and so on. As a country, we have not created an effective rural advisory system and education system. Of course, we have some achievements. There is a slight demographic rejuvenation, and this partially attributed to the CAP. Also, the CAP has also contributed to the renewal of economic activities in rural areas. And at the same time, we have developments regarding digitalization. Digitalization only concerns the management of programs. There is a great lack of information towards farmers on the CAP. This leads to false beliefs on the CAP on the part of producers. Sometimes governments provide funds to sectors that can absorb these funds in a quicker way. So what the CAP has achieved. There is a reverse trend in terms of urbanization comparing to the 80s and 90s in Greece. The agricultural income in Greece may not be increased in the same way as the rest EU countries, but it presents the smaller deviation comparing to other sectors. Of course, the financial crisis has contributed to this the small increase. In financial terms, from 2.2 billion deficit in the agricultural balance, we have we went from deficit to surplus. However, productivity has not increased, land allotment has not increased, and there is a twofold issue regarding the human resources of Greek agriculture. And in the end, agricultural income greatly depends on the direct payments, almost 54%. As Mr. Zavos and Haniotis said, what can be done is a better distribution of direct payments, because some sectors were favored compared to others. The basic conclusion is that we focused on income and not the restructuring of the rural development in the framework of the CAP. Now, trying to conclude a programming phase with a deadline on the 31st of December to submit the strategic plan. But this happens in a first known framework when it comes to the Greek rural development programs. There are great changes brought by the Green Deal. I will agree with Mr. Haniotis. There was always a green aspect in the CAP. For example, the resources allocated for organic farming were about 30% of the rural development programs. If we add to the reclamation works funds and funds for other organic aspects, the bigger problem of the country is the relation of agriculture with the water supplies management. Our greenhouse emissions are lower than the EU. In terms of biodiversity, we are already in 29% in Natura areas. The soil issue exists, but it also correlates with the climate conditions. I will not mention farm to fork and qualitative goals. In organic farming, we are on 9%, which is above the EU average. But reaching 25% in 10 years, I wouldn't say that this is a feasible target. But what happens globally? There is a trend of mergers and acquisitions in the upstream of the chain, that is industries that produce inputs, but there is also a trend of mergers and acquisition in the downstream of the supply chain, namely wholesale and retail commerce. There is a constant and intense decrease of about 25% of agricultural land. So this trend is accompanied by the increase of giant industrialized farming companies. And Mr. Balakakis, as I say, I don't have much time. Mr. Haniotis referred to these elements. So the basic features of the strategic plan: eco schemes, that is 25% of the first pillar funds to be allocated for eco schemes. These are obligatory for the member state, but voluntarily for the producer. Now, an innovative feature is social conditionality, that is full respect in order to combat social inclusion and improve social inclusion of rural area residents, and the promotion of bioeconomy, circular economy, interconnection of One Health with well-being and livestock well-being, monitoring with the U-delivery model, which is more binding. There were always commitments. It is not the first time a reserve is implemented, but it is the first time that it is implemented to such a great extent. And my personal take on this, I only represent myself. What are the basic conditions in order to achieve the goals of the strategic plan? Have a sincere dialogue in Greece. What do we want and what do we expect from the CAP? What do we expect from Greek agriculture? What do we expect and what can we achieve on rural areas? This has not happened to date. It's a one-way dialogue. Individual issues are addressed. We do not see the bigger picture. And I would say that the bigger picture is important, especially with an emphasis on social cohesion. A basic condition for the strategic plan is to implement digital transformation works of the Ministry of Rural Development. The Payment and Control Agency must make steps in order to align its targets with the strategic plan. At some point, as a country, we must solve our basic problems, that is, acquire a land registry, make forest maps, and create management plans for the Natura areas. And finally, with all respect to Mr. Haniotis, a rationalization of the requirements of the committee from member states when it comes to strategic plans. There was a discussion on indices. Some of these indices are 40 to 45%. Some of them cannot even be calculated. And it's extremely difficult on such short notice, especially with the IT systems available for member states to respond to the implementation of such difficult indices. Thank you very much.